Thanks so much. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Hammond, and I'm the chairman of the Tourist Development Council, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's February 9th, 2023, and I have 9:03 as the time. Let's begin this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. And at this time, I'd like to ask for the roll call. Here. Mayor Holly Smith. Here. Councilwoman Darla Long. Present. Tony Lackey. Here. Jay Johnson. Here. Rob Wells. Here. Bill Washington. Good morning. Brian Kramer. Good morning. Councilman Bill Steinke. Here. Councilman Larry Diesel. Here. All right, thank you very much. At this time, we'll take up approval of the January 12th, 2023 TDC meeting minutes. I assume everyone's had a chance to review them. Does anybody wish to make a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, motion for approval from Mayor Smith, and the second was from Councilwoman Bonk. Do we have any discussion on the minutes? Seeing no discussion, are there any objections? No objections, that motion carries unanimously. At this time, we'll take up the public to be heard. Has anyone come this morning to speak in public comment? If so, just raise your hand and I'll... Ms. Lovegrove, how are you? Good morning. Good. At this time, would you proceed to the podium then and feel free to share your good news.
Good morning, TDC Council and members and VCB. I'm here today. My name is Leoma Lovegrove, and I hope I can get through this. My name is Leoma Lovegrove, and I'm here with my husband, Michael J. Silberg, and we are from Mount Lachey. We've been there 28 years, and like all of you, we've been affected by the ferocious Hurricane Ian. And I want to go back, I'm going to be short, but I want to go back 26 years, when Kimball Matthews walked into my gallery and said, you know, you need to connect with tourism. And then she introduced me to Tamara Pygott. And from that day forward, they took somebody new in their career and taught them about tourism, about people, and about relationships. And it was huge for me as a painter for them to embrace me like they did. So we're talking with some major magazines up in Meredith or somewhere like that. And so I am talking about alligators. Tamara comes up to me. We don't talk about alligators. I love to paint alligators. No, we don't talk about alligators. And so now we have a hurricane. We have Hurricane Ian, the 500-year hurricane, they're calling it. And I'm sure we don't want to talk about hurricanes with tourism, but it's part of our history now. And it's part of our history because, especially for the TDC Council and the government and VCB, they are here today working with the community, with the businesses, while they too have been affected. Their homes, their family, they probably have lost members that they know of. I'm here today to honor them. And I'm going to tell a short story how I'm maintaining through this hurricane. 2 weeks before the hurricane hit, I was on a Viking cruise with my husband, and we were in Austria, and we visited a concentration camp. So, as an artist, you know, I like visuals, and so there were these huge murals, like 15 feet at this museum, at this concentration camp, and it showed just a bunch of Jews walking down the street. And what the Nazis told them, go home, get all gold, your silver, your photographs, all your family mementos, and put them in a knapsack, put them in a pillowcase. So the next mural, I mean, it was incredible, another 15-foot mural of all these people walking with a knapsack on their back. And it was incredible. The next photo was another 15, I mean, these are very impressive, huge. The photo was a pile of these knapsacks, these pillowcases filled with the worldly possessions, stacked as high as the eye could see. The next one was all of them walking in nude into the gas chamber. Now, I know this is a horrible story, but when I think of what Hurricane Ian did to us, we get up and we get to live and we get to move forward. And I'm here today to move forward with all of you and my husband as well. So, after the hurricane, I'm walking around the garden. I have a massive garden. We saw 1,000 people a day in the garden, and it was a place where people made memories. They got married. We had memorials. We had everything there, and it's gone. But I'm, going through the muck, and I found some paint. I found some brushes, and there's no canvas, no paper. All my paper is just shredded, but I found shingles off my roof and off the neighbor's roof. I mean, all these shingles kind of like landed in my garden and everywhere else too. So I started painting on them. And today I presented each one of you with a piece of my roof and with a little history of Matlacha. And we are not rebuilding in Matlacha, which some of you know, but we are relocating to downtown Fort Myers. And we look forward to moving forward with all of you. One more thing, this is for Tamara Pygott. I get to call her out because I've known her for 26 years.
Thank you, Leoma.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ms. Lovejoy. Well, we certainly wish you the very best on your new location, and we thank you for your commitment to helping us grow our tourism economy here in Lee County, so thank you. Has anyone else come to speak this morning under public to be heard? Okay, seeing none, then I'll close the public to be heard portion of the agenda. Are there any municipalities to be heard this morning? Just raise your hand. Any municipalities? Okay, I see none, so we'll move to the report of the executive director. Before we take that up, we have the Hurricane Ian beach erosion presentation later. Okay, so yeah, we'll take up the report of the executive director. Ms. Pygott?
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. I wish I was sharing better news. Normally we have good news here, but as we know, the challenges we face are going to make the next few months and maybe years challenging, but we will, as Leoma said, we will move forward day by day, step by step. December bed tax collections were $2.9 million, a decline of 45% compared to December of 2021. And for the fiscal year to date, this would be October 1st through the December collection period, and any prepayments, we are just under 7.8 million, which would be a 39 or nearly 40% decline to this same period last year. STAR report shows some slight declines in occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR, but not terribly significant. 72% on the occupancy, 185.64 on ADR for RevPAR of 133.72. And our key data dashboard is showing an occupancy of 20, this is the vacation rentals, an occupancy of 23%, ADR at 210, and RevPAR at 47%. We are working with key data to get a better handle on how many vacation rentals are really offline versus unoccupied. And though we believe that occupancy reflects what they're getting from their direct relationship businesses, most of which are island businesses, We're not completely convinced that it's reflective of the entire picture, because we do know that vacation rentals scattered throughout the county are performing better than that. But we're working on that. When you do data scraping as a source, it's a little challenging. Most people are not pulling their vacation rental listing down. So they've just got the dates blocked out, but it's there. In terms of activity at the airport for December, 862,368. That's a decrease of 20.6%. But for the calendar year, the airport did see 10.3 million passengers, which was a slight increase over 2021 and a record year for the airport, highest number of passengers ever recorded. So a big congratulations to them, and indication of how well tourism was going prior to Hurricane Ian.
I think you just said it right there. I mean, 2022 was such a powerful, record-breaking year until the storm hit, that we were able to carry through basically October, November, December, and still have a record passenger count at the airport, even with the losses that we saw. So 2022 was a good year until the storm, for sure.
For sure. With that, I'd like to ask Joseph St. Germain to come up and give us the fourth quarter data report. Joseph, you too are used to giving better news than this, but we are going to continue to track occupancy, visitation, and we've added a few new questions in to get a little bit of feel.
Okay.
So,
real quick before we start on this, did anybody have any questions about the STAR numbers or the airport numbers? Yeah, Mr. Kramer.
sorry. Yes. It acknowledges that the number of available rooms is reduced. We've worked really closely with them. In fact, our staff provided them information in order for them to get the report right. But I feel confident that the STAR data is very accurate now. For a few months, it was a little wonky, but we worked very closely with them because, as you know, we've been surveying the hotels and keeping track. In fact, just our last date of collection was first week of this month, and February 2/2 we finalized our current number, and it's right just under 68%, 9,700 hotel rooms open. I think I've said this, I think we'll creep pretty close to 70, and then we'll probably hold at 70 for a period of time, as we know, some units will not be coming online for a longer period of time.
Any other questions on that? Okay, thank you. Mr. St. Germain, go for it.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Joseph St. Germain. I'm the president of Downs & St. Germain Research. As Tamara mentioned, this isn't necessarily a good news report, but it is the news. And it's, to understand where we're going to go, we got to understand where we are. Overall, before I even show the big numbers, I do want to note a couple things. Visitation was a lot longer in October through December overall. Sorry, the length of the visit, apologies. That's largely, we believe, due to when you have some of your recovery workers or people volunteering, things of that nature, they're staying longer periods of time. Also, your people staying with friends and relatives and staying in their second homes, they always tend to stay a little bit longer. Well, they make up a higher percentage of your visitors, so you're going to see a length of stay. For those reasons, you're going to notice the number of visitors went down even more than some of the other metrics. So we also want to report something called visitor days. It's just the number of days visitors are in the county, which frankly we think is a better metric than the number of visitors. Because to give you an example, if you have 10 people staying one night, that's 10 visitor days. If you have one person spending 10 nights, that's also 10 visitor days. The economic impact's about the same. The room nights are the same. However, the number of visitors changes by a factor of 10. So that is just something I wanted to introduce and something that we'll be looking at. As you know, there's fewer units available. The good news is we start to see some of the STAR and the key data figures, because that's something we use for our inputs, but we also do an occupancy study with some of the hoteliers and vacation rental folks. Those are in line. So it is, we believe this is our best estimate as we go forward. The other thing that you'll notice with the visitor number going down, we had a lower travel party size. a lot of the people who are working has travel party size of 1. So it's just different from previous years. So you'll see changes throughout, and I'll try to note those as we go through. We always include this. I'm not going to go through everything here because I'm going to touch on all the notes. But if you're ever looking at the report, you only have like a minute to look at it. This is kind of what we see as like, hey, these are the big changes year over year, and explains some of the changes. But again, not going to go through that all because I'm going to touch on everything. So here is the big metric. Focus on the percent change year over year. Visitation was down 50%. As we look at some of the like TDT numbers, that was at 40%, effectively down, which kind of is in line with room nights. In fact, when you saw some of the figures, those are in line. Spending was down overall 31%, again in line with TDT. But the spending wasn't down as much because of you have these visitors staying longer periods of time. So that is why we like to focus on the visitor days, which was still down 33%. So it still drops, but as you look at TDT is always the number that we look at as a really one of our great indicators of the tourism economy, because we're always going to collect taxes. So you'll see all these numbers are kind of around that 40% drop. Spending was a little bit higher. Because things cost a little bit more year over year. The number of visitors were down, but that's because they were staying generally longer periods of time. So this is kind of this basically, I believe, will kind of be hopefully our baseline as we move forward, and then as we units come back online, things of that nature. This is kind of where we're at this point. To kind of take some of the numbers that Tamara just mentioned, occupancy overall is down about 20%, but that's largely driven by the vacation rentals. As you saw with the STAR reports, occupancy in the hotels has still been very strong, even though the number of units is a little bit less. The rate has been about flat year over year, resulting in a RevPAR that was also down about 20%. As we look at key metrics to date, visitation, so this is actually for the entire year, visitation was down about 5%. Room nights were down about 2%. But, kind of like the airport metric that you just heard, spending and overall economic impact for calendar year 2022 was still up. And that's not because of October through December. You just had a great 9 months prior to it, and then you were still able to kind of stay up year over year. Like I said, admittedly, one of the things that kind of stands out about 22, everything costs a little bit more, so that is part of the reason spending is up. But also, one of the things that I like to remind a lot of boards, because I get a lot of questions about inflation. But the other thing we've noticed pre-pandemic is the share of wallet in the American household for travel has increased by percentage. Once you took that away, we've just seen, like, if America did a budget, travel is creating greater percentage. So we're seeing bigger numbers in spending. So I wanted to spend a little bit extra time there before we get into. In fact, I'll stop here to see if there's any questions on the big figures before I start looking into your visitor profile.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Wells.
I'm assuming that we don't take numbers on this, but the obvious is that there's got to be, you've got the west side of the county in these numbers. The west side of the county, which would be either offline or occupancy numbers would be tremendously low. And then the east side of the county, where you've got this sort of makes up for it. It's a little surprising to me that the visitor number, spend number would be up, because I would just expect a lot from the workers that are coming in, and they would spend less than your typical tourist. But it's not, I don't know, maybe that's not being reflected here. So I guess it's a two-part question. One, we don't really differentiate within the county by area, or we would see, I'm assuming, a massive difference between the west side and the east side. And two, I'm a little puzzled instead. Staying in the game with the spend.
In fairness, he showed spend down for the quarter, Rob.
He did.
30%.
As the decrease.
In visitors, because he said they're staying longer. So as they stay longer, then that spend is a little higher, right? It's not a per day spend, it's a total spend. So they're staying a little bit longer, so they're spending more. I would say that workers have dining expense accounts, and they're, maybe some of the people with a restaurant here could speak to that. I suspect that's what it is. They're eating out and when they're here, for sure.
We find a lot of the workers are spending more money. They're spending more money on beer and liquor, and they're spending more money on big steaks.
Big steaks, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's what's being, and
And unless you're in an extended stay or something like that, then they have
And
to
you're
go
not
out.
cooking. They have to eat out,
And
right?
we're not showing, I know for Fort Myers Beach and for the city of Sanibel and Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't ask.
No, go over in the,
That actually, you did have many resources that came in to help them, but those have gone. So there's a lot more spending individually rather than having chow meals or free meals or things like that.
And I think especially those areas where they're staying, there's a lot of activity going on, Rob. I mean, I know that, you know what I mean, that isn't reflective of what's going on along the coast, but it's certainly reflective of what's going on where those hotels that they're staying in are and those units they're staying in. But for the year, spending is up because we were having a really fantastic year. So I think that, the difference is, in my mind, it feels right based on the activity we're seeing. It's like traffic. I think we all would agree. We've never seen so many white trucks moving around in our entire life. Activity is up, so the spend being better than the number of visitors makes a little bit of sense to me.
I think you're going to see it possibly change in the first quarter because, like your October, November, you had all the insurance adjusters here, larger expense accounts. They were on, they wrote the limit policies and then they were gone. I mean, they're out. So really, first quarter, we're going to see really more of the workers and probably a mix of transient. But I think you got the
And maybe even number of construction people going up as the insurance, because the checks are coming in and now they can,
right. I
sign
think
their
it'll
contract.
shift in the first quarter versus what you saw more here in this quarter was more of expense reports, and they're gone within 30, 60 days. They were out of here.
Right.
Limit claims and come out.
Mr. Johnson?
I can only speak to our personal experience, but our January was the strongest January we've ever had when you look at top line revenue. So, I mean, the spend is absolutely there.
That's excellent. That is interesting. Well, good.
And frankly, everyone hit the key points. The biggest one is length of stay, but even to your point, the dipping in spend in shopping and entertainment was greater than the dip in restaurants and things of that nature. So that is reflected. It's just tougher to do it without going through every single data point. And that's the other thing too, is like one of the things we're working on this year is just making sure we're in different areas as much as we can, because we had a design that had the beaches a lot. Well, we're not doing many surveys at the beaches, so we're doing things on the data collection side as well. But it's a good question, and if you look at the spending by category, you'll notice those changes are a little bit more prominent, whereas the accommodation spend and the restaurant spend and the grocery spend, which is some of your, if you're having some Busch Light from Publix and that kind of things, those are still in there. It's just the dips in shopping and entertainment is where we see a little bit more of a dip. All right. Well, I'll go through as we go through the visitor, we kind of go through the visitor.
One more, Joseph, real quick. One
More of a question for Tim. Do we have the exact account of what's online and what's not online for hotel-wise?
Yes.
I know vacation rental is.
Hotel-wise, we have a very thorough count.
What's the number?
9726, I think, is the late. You know what? Let me email it to you after, because I don't have it right in front of me. But 9,700-ish hotel rooms reopened.
And what
that
we have
is-
pre-storm.
15-ish. 50, yeah, somewhere between 15 and 16. It's 60, just under 68%.
Okay.
And those are not only star reporting, correct? Those are hard.
Correct. Those are hard numbers.
That
Correct.
That type number. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, bricks and mortar number.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Some of the ones aren't on the star, you know how that goes, but we have a good list. Happy.
Yeah, it's separate. That number is unknown.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, the vacation rental number is, as we all know, impossible to get our hands around.
Right.
I think that's unless the municipality is making them register, then you get a better number. But if the municipalities are not asking them to register, then getting a number is an inordinate challenge.
Difficult to enforce.
Right.
Oh, no, I think this is all good discussion for, when you see the full picture for the first time in a minute. So as we walk through, we'll just walk through the visitor journey. Feel free to, I'll have time for questions at the end. Feel free to stop me. Trip planning, there wasn't much change there. It feels, as you look at the distribution, it's like there's two different types of visitors. You have your hurricane recovery visitor and then your true leisure visitor and things of that nature. And so those planning cycles of the leisure visitor are still fairly long. We had about the same percentage considering other locations. The interesting this time, where they considered was vastly different. Most of your visitors, if they were considering other places, they were considering other places in Southwest Florida or the Keys. So that is going to be interesting to watch as we move forward. This changed a lot. As I mentioned, the number of people coming to the area to visit your friends and family, especially in a quarter like this that has Thanksgiving, the holidays, things of that nature, the number of people who came to visit their friends and family were about the same, but the percentage went up significantly just because there's a fewer number of visitors. But you do have a lot of people coming. There are still people coming to relax and unwind. You got a significant percentage who are just coming to check on their property in October through December. And then you also had significant percentages who are volunteering, hurricane recovery, things of that nature. We actually saw an increase of noticing promotions of those who came. 40% versus 33% last year, where they noticed it largely on the internet, social media, travel reviewers, blogs. Again, a lot of times with a visitor tracking study, I can't say exactly why they looked at things like reviewers' blogs. That's not the point of it. At the same time, I would guess for the foreseeable future, we'll see a lot about that just because if they're going to come here for a leisure trip, they might do a little bit more of noticing and looking into, hey, how are things looking while we're down there? The number of visitors who flew was down, or by percentage, which is kind of in line with the airport figures. But still, if they are coming to the area, you still have most of them are going through RSW. In terms of the profile's a little bit different than we're used to seeing. You do have a little bit more in Florida, whether it's by our numbers or the arrivalist numbers, and I think that that has to do with the recovery. I did want to note you had an increase in the percentage of international visitors. However, it was a decrease in the number of international visitors. So just because you have fewer folks, but I guess our thought was some of these trips months and months or years ago, they're just like, all right, I'm still going to these places that I am. Top origin markets, Tampa, Miami, New York, and then we get into some of the other ones if you go down the list, the Bostons, the Minneapolis, the Clevelands, things of that nature. All of them are towards the top. And again, I just, with this Florida continuing to pop up, I think that hurricane recovery is part of that. The travel party was a lot different this time around. Travel party sizes were smaller. You had fewer traveling with children. The biggest thing was about 20% of your visitors came by themselves, which compared to the previous year, which was 10%. So again, I think that's either people coming to spend time with their family or, again, those people related to the hurricane just coming to help. In some way, shape, or form. For the trip experience, where they're staying, big shift from previous years. If they're staying in market, hotels significantly more than condos. I mean, you saw the occupancy numbers, the units available, things of that nature, but we saw a significant increase in the non-paid accommodations, which is people staying in their second homes or staying with their friends and relatives. We always tend to see an uptick of staying with their friends and relatives around the holidays. It just, you see a larger percentage change just because that, like I said, that number stayed the same, but it makes up a larger proportion of all of your visitors. The average length of stay went up by about 2 nights. And that's what, as someone who's in charge of the calculation in the spreadsheet, that's why I wanted to point out visitor days, because it pushes that visitor number way down, but those they're still in the hotels or they're still in the market with their friends and family and going out to the restaurants, but it just pushes that visitor number down. So, but we still had 1 in 4 coming for the first time. But we still also had about 1 in 4 who are loyal visitors, been here over 10 times. This is probably where we saw the biggest shift in everything. Where did they stay? Fort Myers is normally towards the top, but not almost half of the visitors. Cape Coral second, Bonita Springs third. Cape Coral and Bonita Springs historically are always behind Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, things of that nature. Obviously, that shift has happened due to the hurricane. Finally, before I get into the evaluation, the overall metrics of satisfaction, recommendation, likelihood to return, the numbers are down. And they're not at the same time. I wouldn't consider these bad, considering we're talking about folks who were here in November and December, which means they're a month or 2 months removed, or 2 or 3 months removed. You still have 87% who are likely to recommend the area. That's down from 95%. 85% are likely to return, down from 89%. You do have 2/3 who are likely to return next year, which is actually up. That's always kind of an anomaly in October through December, just because you have so many people visiting their friends and family. Well, if they have a tradition to come down here and see their friends and family during the holidays or Thanksgiving, that's going to stay there. Satisfaction figures were down from satisfaction was at 90%, down from 97% year over year. Customer service ratings were at 88% this year, down from 92% year over year. The biggest thing in terms of satisfaction was the people who were very satisfied. We always like to focus on very. If you're very satisfied, you're more likely to word of mouth when you go home is more likely to happen. People who were very satisfied was right at just under 50% this year versus 66% last year. And that's, frankly, that's a tricky thing when you have what this storm did. And, I think that explains a lot of it, but you kind of need to I just want to kind of let you know that's where we're at. Finally, the concerns. 2 and 5 talked about traffic. Heck, traffic came up in the 20 minutes before this presentation started. So it's, and that's something even I've talked about with staff when I'm like, should I stay downtown? Is getting here on time? Is that going to be an issue? Also, 1 and 7 were high prices. Prices, if you're trying to stay in a hotel, since post-pandemic they have been high numbers. But 1 and 4 had no concerns. I think the biggest thing to take from the visitors' concerns. Nothing about the storm was at the top of their list. I don't see the storm on the top. So their expectations, and that we did add options for that of things related to the storm. So the ramifications of maybe pricing due to more limited supply and the traffic due to having more people here to work, those are ancillary. But I think the good news is it's not the storm. It's not the concern wasn't the storm directly. As Tamara mentioned, we added a question. This is what we asked the visitors. And the question we asked is, when do you think the area will recover enough to make the area feel back to normal? Which is a difficult question. It's just, but these are with people who were here. And this, for the first time we present this, I don't know exactly what this tells. I think the biggest thing is when we see how this changes over time. But they do know recovery isn't going to be a couple months. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing here. And at the same time, you notice satisfaction, some of the other metrics were down, but they weren't down significantly. So, you have to take some of that with a grain of salt. As we looked at when we talked to hoteliers, vacation rentals, accommodation folks, how does it look for January through March? Up, same, down, or about the same. I mean, and this is, and now granted, these are folks who are largely currently open. April through June reservations were again about the same. Admittedly, one of the things about that since we've started the post storm, the response rates that we've gotten on these have gone down a little bit. So there's a little bit more variability in these. It really does depend on who actually responds to these surveys. So we're working on ways to increase those to pre-storm levels, but it is going to be a little bit of a slog getting there. And I want to finish with some of the quotes that people said. I mean, it's a really wonderful place. It's quaint and peaceful. It's my favorite place in the world to relax and watch the sunset. Despite having no access to the beaches when we visited, we still have a tremendous vacation because of the great weather, plentiful restaurants, and shopping options. It's really an amazing area. And I had a great time here on vacation with my family. Despite the events of Hurricane Ian, it's still a wonderful place to visit. It's a very welcoming area. I just wanted to bring some of these quotes to light, that even though some of them were even disappointed they couldn't go to those beaches, it's not just beaches, you know, especially as someone who grew up in Minnesota. The weather is really appealing to, even though I don't live there anymore, I still get to talk to my dad, and he can't get through swearing in a conversation with him in January because it's X degrees below zero. So something, and the restaurants and the shopping, it's still there. So I just wanted to, in the wake of a lot of not necessarily surprising news, but not necessarily positive news, and kind of seeing how things have changed post-storm, I did want to close with some quotes that kind of show, like, hey, you know, people still like you, and you know, they still like being here. So with that, I did want to open up to questions before I turn it over.
Mr. Lappy, go ahead.
You know, the visitor hurricane covered forecast. It's interesting because it says, when do you think Fort Myers area, Fort Myers area, they talking primarily Fort Myers area, they're not talking about the beaches. Or they talking, to me, I mean, I live on San Miguel
Yes.
Valley, that's one thing, but when I drive over and I come into certain places, like, man, there was no hurricane.
Right.
You know? So what areas do you think they use just Fort Myers area? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's a good question, because at the very start of the survey, we'll show them a map and kind of saying, like, hey, it includes this area and this area and this area and this, you know, whether it's, you know, it's usually a list where it's say, hey, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, and a few others. But that's a mouthful to say a whole bunch of times. So we define it at the very start and then say, hey, for the rest of the survey, we're going to talk about the entire county and call it Fort Myers area. Just to get, so we're talking about the full county, but when they get to that point, we just call it the Fort Myers area, just because otherwise it's a mouthful.
And these people that were interviewed, were they in the Fort Myers area? I mean, or did anybody bring people out of Sanibel?
We didn't do much out in Sanibel in terms of where we did the intercepts. That doesn't mean they didn't go there, but especially like October was really, we didn't do much data collection just because of what that was. November, you know, we're still finding new locations, but we're also going to where the visitors are currently. So that isn't necessarily out there as often. So that's, but along those lines, as we recover, we will want to be reintroducing there. Frankly, for much of October, November, December, we didn't want to get in the way out there with our staff.
Mayor Smith and then Councilwoman Bong.
And I was just looking at that. That was a question I had as well, Tony, but then I look at the cumulative for late 23, 24, don't know. It's almost 70%.
Yep.
So I think that's pretty reflective of, yep, you know, we don't know either.
Right.
So, but we're working every day to look for those dates earlier than later. So I think that does give a synopsis of the majority of saying, we're not sure yet.
Yeah, no, you're exactly correct. And like I said, this will be interesting to see how that, when we're reporting this in January through March, how did it change? Have those perceptions changed at all? That's what makes that first one a little bit tricky. There's a lot of I don't know, and it's understandable.
Councilwoman Bong and then Mr. Kramer.
My question is related to the traffic. So hurricane worker traffic aside, what type of data is available for markets like ours where we are continuing to grow in population, where we begin to see an impact either negatively or positively on the growth and development and traffic on visitation to the area? And how does that, are there trends that show what the future impact to tourism is with?
With a study like this, it's not about trending moving forward. It's largely documenting what's happened, and then you can start making some inferences. And for what it's worth, to the traffic point, I think traffic's been number one since we started working with you. And you know, and it's probably, if I went back through the reports before that, it probably is too. And to be fair to that, whether we're talking to residents or visitors, the one thing with traffic, you're dealing with it every day, even if it's for the 7.8 days for your trip, or if you're a resident, you're dealing with it every day. So it never leaves that top of mind. So something to consider. The one thing I want to point out this time, it was higher than we usually saw it, just because, you know, it's been more pervasive.
Yeah. Mr. Kramer.
Can you remind me how we survey these people? Are they mail-out surveys? Are they in-person surveys? Is it a combination? How do we do it, and how many surveys do we typically get from people?
good questions. In a normal quarter, we get 900 surveys, or that's at least 900 surveys. The vast majority are done with we have intercepted interviewers with iPads at locations, whether it be hotels, beaches previously, attractions, places where you have large numbers of visitors. Events would be another one. Coming up will be spring training, things of that nature. So the vast majority are done with an iPad with our interviewing staff. Oh, the airport is another one. And then we also do some online. We work with a lot of different destinations in Florida, so we kind of have an online, hey, did you visit Florida? If so, where did you visit? And then we walk through them that way. Especially I thought that was important post-storm, it's tougher to get some of the hurricane recovery workers unless we're in the hotels where they are. So we supplemented that a little bit with some online to make sure those are part of our sample as well.
And
That would then, so the people that were then interviewing, do we qualify why they're here? Are they here for vacation, or are they here for visiting their house? Are they here as workers and
Yep.
adjusters? So that we're looking at visitor that's here for vacation versus visitor that's on vacation. Each time because the people that may be interviewed, maybe in these other locations that you weren't in before in the past, could be here for completely different reasons. And so it may skew what we're looking at in numbers here compared to what we looked at before. Because you were interviewing people on the beach that clearly were there for a beach vacation versus interviewing somebody in Benita Springs or somewhere else that isn't there for the beach.
Yes, two responses to that. Number one, we do have a reasons for visiting question. That's one of the early questions. So we kind of, what brought you here would be effectively what that does. And then secondly, along those lines, the goal of every quarter is to make a representative sample. So we're at different places. You are correct, we're not at the beaches anymore because there's not many visitors for this period. But at the same time, we're going where the visitors are. So that's why you did see a shift in those things. And moving forward, it's a constant process of making sure we have a nice representative sample. So that where we're doing the interviewers, it did shift in October through December, but it also, where your visitors are, also shifted during that period. And Tamara, I think you wanted to...
well, I just wanted to add that another way you're collecting visitor surveys is with a direct relationship with the hotel. If the hotel will allow them to send their survey to their guests, they will do that. So if anybody's interested in that, see Joseph, and he is happy to work with you to survey your guests, and he will share that information about your guests specifically in a report directly back to you. So there are some properties, I'm guessing the ones who are doing it aren't online anymore right this moment, but he has been working with some properties to do this. I mean, it is really, I think it's important to keep in mind who is a visitor today looks different than who a visitor was in Q4 of 2022. 2021, excuse me, obviously. But they're still a visitor, and our job is to track them and identify them and provide this information. But you are absolutely correct. Many of them are not leisure travelers.
Yes, and to Tamara's point, we're always looking for more locations. That's something I talk with Tamara and her team every year, because you have a location that allows us to be there, and then we can't, so then we have to pick up something. So that's something we're always ready and willing to do, because we want to make sure it's representative.
I see Mr. Wachulis and then Mr. Johnson.
Joseph, I'm looking at the occupancy barometer. I'm just surprised these numbers aren't worse. But so I didn't catch those hotels that reported in. Was it down from previous surveys? We talked 30 to 40% of the rooms are down. Is that about what you saw from reporting?
It's about this. That's about right. Like we'll use 100. In previous quarters, maybe we get 100 responses. Right now, we're in around the 60 or so responses. And frankly, that was to be expected because some of, people who had the time before may not have the time right now, and we understand. So we're doing everything we can. In fact, we've increased the incentives to participate. So, and that is something that, heck, Tamara and the team, we were talking about before the storm hit, ways to do it. So it is, it is a sample of, I would need to check the numbers to see how many units that all represents. It's a significant number, but it's not as big as it's been in previous quarters.
Sounds like the ones that reported are the ones that are open, the ones that are.
Yes.
not
As you would
open.
expect.
Don't bother me, I'm trying to
As you would
put my room
expect.
back together, so.
Exactly.
It gives you a perspective of just who's open and how they're feeling.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I think that is an important distinction because it is. I'm still going to ask the folks that are closed, see what their perspectives are. I'm also not going to expect them to answer, but I'm going to ask that. I'll put the question out there.
That would be the interesting question is the ones that are not open, when do you think you're coming online? Because then you tie your marketing and
Of course.
shift it around
But
to.
in fairness, we've asked that question many, many times, and we're getting very limited responses.
They don't know.
I know why.
Because you can't answer the question. I mean, maybe you
I think you're
can, but
getting closer to people to be able to answer that question now. Probably in the fourth quarter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm busy trying to.
correct. I think, we will continue to communicate and ask those questions, but in fairness, I think there's still a whole lot of people that are like, TBD.
Very good.
And we did ask. I mean, we did get some responses for people that aren't open. It just there wasn't enough data just from those to bring something forward to the board that's actionable. It's which is understandable. So that's just something I wanted to mention.
Gotcha. Any further questions or comments then? All right, thank you for the report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we have a special presentation on the beaches, Hurricane Ian beach erosion and repair. I'd like to recognize Steve Boutel from Lee County Natural Resources.
Good morning. Well, that's coming up. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Boutel, and along with Mike Campbell, we manage the beach projects that Lee County does in-house. We also try to make ourselves available as a technical resource and a liaison for other entities that have projects going on or that didn't used to but do now. So from that perspective, we're able to give a little bit of an overview of what's going on county-wide, and we thought this was important, particularly because of the recent news coverage and things related to state funding that's coming in, lots of questions about how are these millions of dollars being applied and what's that really mean for our beaches. So we'll take a pretty quick tour through here, and without triggering anybody's PTSD, it's important just to recognize that as this storm crossed the state of Florida, it had impacts not just here, but significant impacts on the East Coast as well. That's part of the reason why we've seen such an immediate and tremendous response from the state of Florida, because there are lots of people that were impacted. For us, the impacts are variable around the county because of the location of the landfall. It made a big difference if you were in that eye, if you were up in Boca Grande on that soft side, if you want to call it that, or if you were down south, Fort Myers Beach, Bonita, Sanibel, and those areas that were right in the worst of it. And it makes a big difference because that's what is fundamental to the beach erosion. And so if you're up in Port Manatee, they actually had lower tides, a couple feet lower. If you're in Boca Grande, it was about a 2-foot surge. By the time you get down to South Seas, north end of Captiva, the bayside there, about 3 feet. Start to work our way south, Blind Pass. Now you're talking about 6 feet. And it goes up very quickly to where we were seeing those 13 plus kind of levels around Sanibel down through Fort Myers Beach. And the surge stayed over 8 feet all the way down almost to Everglades City. So tremendous impacts. Now for beaches, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but some of them, as that surge goes up, the water gets high enough that it no longer feels, the waves aren't attacking the beach. It goes over the top. But that caused some different problems, which we didn't really anticipate. And so what I'm going to do is work our way down north to south. Give you a very quick overview of what happened in those locations, what we think those impacts are going to cost out looking like, and So a couple of things that's important to realize is that post-storm, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and that's my USACE down here. Anytime you see that, that's our Army Corps friends. You'll see FDEP in here a lot as well. That's Florida Department of Environmental Protection, our state beach colleagues. They send out teams very quickly, coordinate with the locals to try to do assessments of what the erosion impacts are. And then they end up with a erosion conditions category that they assign, which has been consistently applied by the state for decades. And it's ranked from 1 to 4. 1 means you lost a little beach. 2 means you lost a little beach and it kind of got to your dune. 3 means, okay, we had a significant impact to our dune and beach. And 4 means your dune's basically gone. So that's a major stockpile of sand, very important for the overall health and function of our beaches. So condition 4, pretty bad. They code out the entirety of the county. So you can see up in Boca Grande, they had that condition 1, again, kind of being on the soft side. These are before and after pictures that are a little hard to see, but this is right by the Gasparilla Inns Beach Club. And back here, that dark area, that's their dune that was right up against the seawall. And so what happened there is they had wave attack, came in, and it basically washed all that out and reflected that sand is now what's piled up in that near shore sandbar. That'll probably recover, but they also lost some of that volume. And that's a federal project. It's taken care of completely by the Army Corps of Engineers. So we're not going to likely see any direct impact to us fiscally. They're still working through that process. The PIR is their speak for how they evaluate the impacts. Project impact report. Positive means that it was an extraordinary storm, had an impact that was quantifiable, and that they will come in and make that repair as soon as they get their congressional appropriations. We expect to see them come in and take care of that at 100% federal cost. And one thing that we learned last week is federal legislation changed recently that allows them not just to put back what the storm took out, but potentially rebuild the entirety of the design template for that beach. So we're going to continue working down south here. I will just note really quickly that you see impacts on Cayo Costa and North Captiva Island because of the nature of those unbridged barriers and kind of what the impacts are there, the level of undeveloped area. There's no active management currently on those islands right there, so we don't anticipate any projects in that location, although some individual private property owners may be doing some things related to their property. Okay, so now we're kind of getting out here into really the impact zone, and you'll notice that my symbology changed here. You don't see conditions 1 through 3 anymore. From Captiva south, the entirety of Lee County was a condition 4 state impact on the erosion, which means the dunes were basically destroyed, and a lot of the beach impacts with them. I'll point out on this, whoop, that's not where I wanted to go. Okay. I will point out here that this blue line where you see that, that means there's an active beach project there already. So that's a good thing for us because it's a platform we can use to make progress. I mentioned the surge going up and over the beach. One of the things that we saw so the waves aren't eroding, but what did happen in tremendous volumes is you see up on this aerial what looks like little rivers coming out. When all that surge water decided it was time to go back into the Gulf of Mexico, it found the path of least resistance, and it cut its way out. And these gullies litter the shoreline from Bowman's Beach south to Bonita, including areas that historically have been very stable beaches, never had to have anything done there. So what do we do with those? The beach is trying to recover. In this lower picture, now you see what happens is where some of that sand recovers naturally, it leaves these little ponds. Not ideal for a number of reasons and not something that's going to recover quickly on its own. So the municipalities, the county, we tried to quantify those and address those in what the state put together as a beach recovery plan. And based on that, we expect some resources to be coming our way to help with some of those things. As far as Captiva goes, they quantified with surveys that they lost over 427,000 cubic yards of sand. So what does that mean? Just to give it perspective for you, 100,000 yards, since we were talking about traffic, that would be 5,000 dump trucks. So in this case, you're up there at, somebody do the math on that, 2,200 dump trucks? No, I did the wrong math on that, 22,000 dump trucks. It's a lot of sand. The value of that loss is estimated over $13 million. The good news now, DEP, that recovery plan I mentioned, the governor took a look at that and has already in the last special session said, here's $100 million. We can't fund the full recovery plan, but here's a part of it. So they prorated that out. And right now they're in the process of drafting funding agreements that will come to the locals, no cost share required, that can be applied to these repairs. So that's our estimate of what we think so far will be coming Captiva's way for CEPD to make the repairs there. Simultaneously, they're trying to see if they're eligible for FEMA to come in and pay for some of that, and or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's a complicated legal question for them that we won't get into, but we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. I mentioned that recovery plan, the $100 million. The other piece I'll tell you is in the governor's budget recommendation, which is going to this session, he has already recommended the balance of that funding to be included in there. So even if that federal funding doesn't play out, we have good expectation for additional state funding to come through for all of our partners. Continuing working south now, Sanibel had a couple of impact areas that were distinguished because Blind Pass area, which they're calling Northwest Sanibel, has traditionally been managed by taking the sand out of the inlet, putting it on the beaches. The losses exceed that a little bit, so we're in the process of figuring out how, in addition to what comes out of the inlet, we might help to repair those beaches. Again, we already had some budgeted because of Blind Pass. The governor also said, okay, our most impacted counties, which were 4 in the state of Florida, Lee County being one, here's $5 million. Go help fix these beaches. So we are working with the city of Sanibel and Lover's Key to allocate the $5 million that came to Lee County, which will be likely looking like a truck haul. And in that case, the evacuation road right there at the curve by what used to be Lazy Flamingo is significantly at risk because of the erosion. So we want to get that beach out there to restore the protective value that it affords to that road. So that's coming in addition to the 1.6 is what was coming out of that first phase recovery plan for that piece.
The 2.7
Yes.
line pass, is that the dredging of the pass?
That would be the dredging of the pass that's already budgeted in DEP and the counties.
Is there a timeline on that?
Well, we had anticipated it was going to be this spring. So we're kind of reevaluating that. Blind Pass actually scoured out some by the storm. As that surge left, there's less material in Blind Pass than there was pre-storm, but still a significant amount, 90,000 cubic yards. So that will help to reinforce what we anticipate bringing in by way of trucks in front of the road there.
Yeah, Mayor Smith.
Yeah, when, where we had that beach erosion, that actually has filled in significantly post-storm. So previous storm at that Blind Pass going up to Captiva, we actually were able to open that beach where it was closed before Ian. So that was one of the first beach accesses that we had open. So Ian gave us some sand down there. Down around the curve, thanks to TDC dollars, where we were able to strengthen that curve, that worked. In that area is where we've had a significant loss of sand. These are also Sanibel's legislative priority asks as well. So thank you for partnering with us on those asks.
Certainly.
Mr. Wachulis?
I'd like to go right to the last chapter. What's in the reserves for the beach renourishment?
A lot.
Beach Renourishment Trust Fund.
Well, so the
More
trust
than
fund,
51 million, right?
Right.
so the trust fund is designed to cover what the anticipated project costs are. So when we get to like Fort Myers Beach, that's covered. This Blind Pass piece, that's covered. What wouldn't be covered would be something like the rest of Sanibel, where they have all those gullies, and $30 million, that's a new number that was just.
It's the 18.5, right?
So.
Yes, and I can answer, we do have, the 11.5 is coming directly to Sanibel.
Correct.
I'm going to just pass that forward. Our legislative priority ask was the 30 million. That has now been reduced to the 18.5 million. And in terms of the Army Corps of Engineers, it's my understanding that unless it's an engineered beach, which I'm not sure that Captiva is, I don't know where the engineered beaches are, unless it's an engineered beach, then you are not able to get funding. And maybe that's going to change a little bit, but that was my understanding. We have no engineered beaches within the city of Sanibel.
Right.
But so there's like the difference right now is like
Right.
51 million. So what's in the reserves?
Right. So,
What do we want to get back to?
so we'll get there at the end.
Read the last chapter.
I like going right to the last chapter.
But it's
I'll be patient.
Hey, Bill, you got to watch the whole movie.
so it's important, yeah. Recognize that there's also, in many cases, FEMA claims. You can't say, hey, I've just lost sand on my beach, FEMA, put that back, unless it's that engineered beach that's been maintained. But what you can do is say, hey, those dunes are gone, and this property is now vulnerable to the next small storm that comes. FEMA, will you help me rebuild this dune? And that's what that category B means, is that's an emergency protective dune. And there are a number of places that have requested that of FEMA. That would be sand that would come in under that FEMA program and sort of replace what would otherwise have to be brought in by a nourishment project. So there's a couple of those.
The owners that silted the sand, put it back out there, reimbursement for that expense.
So yeah, that was one of the things that I was going to mention at the end, but we can do that now. The state put in place a program where they put forward $50 million, and it is available to private property owners and condo associations on a first-come, first-served basis. If they did something to restore the beach from storm impacts, they would be eligible for up to 50% reimbursement, capped out at $150,000 per entity. So in the case of a hotel, that doesn't work because it doesn't apply for commercial properties. It's only to individual single-family homes and condo associations. And that's open now. That program is available online for applications today. And then, like I said, it's first come, first serve. It doesn't go past July. Florida Department of Environmental Protection is managing that.
Mayor Smith, go ahead, and then.
So that FDEP opened that on February
February 1st.
And I'm going to be surprised if there is even funding that's still available, because within the first half hour, there was quite a chunk of it that was already requested for. So that helps, like when you've got a condo association, like you saw on one of those slides, that scouring that went through, because there's a limit of where the municipality or the county is responsible for, and then there is the forward of that towards the landward side, that the condominiums associations or private homes. So that program did just come out on February 1st, and we can get you that information on where to apply if it's applicable to you.
Councilman Steinke?
And I'm sure the county's already.
No, that's statewide.
It's a statewide fund, the 50.
Councilman. Very good. Councilman Steinke?
You mentioned that commercial businesses are exempt. Are municipalities exempt as well?
Municipalities, county, we would not be eligible. Local governments are not. They're looking for those single-family homes with that are homesteaded, the condos, and it's actually a check back to those entities. I don't believe the state has ever done anything like this before.
The reason
100 million.
I'm imagining that the Cape Coral Beach would be considered an engineered beach, or not.
I don't know what that beach would be, but there was actually 150 million that was in the kitty. 50 million was for the condominiums, private homeowners. 100 million was actually municipalities and counties, if I'm not mistaken.
We actually provided some comment back in regards to a question, Cape Coral Yacht Club Beach, and it really does come down to a FEMA determination there as to whether or not that is an engineered beach. Clearly, there's been maintenance to it, but if it wasn't built to a design standard, then it probably won't qualify. Category G is what FEMA uses to cover reimbursement of damages to park facilities. It clearly is a park facility, and so if the city could make a case that it was built to that design standard and engineered and maintained as such, then it may be eligible under that FEMA program. It would not be eligible for the state program that we talked about because it is not in that coastal zone that's seaward of the control line. I'm getting in the weeds there, but it's not a DEP beach.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Pulley?
Thank you. Steve, for those who do not have engineering degrees, what is a coastal range monument? What do you use them for?
Question, sorry about that. The range monuments are permanent markers that are reference points that the state of Florida established back in the 70s. And so that is when we go out and monitor what's going on in the beaches, we have the same spot we can go back to every year to do those surveys, and it provides us the way to document changes over time. So when we do our surveys, one of the things that comes into play here is you have to be able to document what the damages were. We do that by way of having surveys completed. And the surveys are consistent over time because we use what's called the R monuments, those reference markers, to make sure that we're measuring consistently the same way in the same place over time to be able to document then what those changes were. All right, we'll keep heading south then. Estero Island is another big one. They've had a project in the works that's in permitting right now. They had additional storm loss that put their total need now up over $1 million. That $22.3 million is what they thought the beach project as planned was anticipated to cost. $7.2 million is an additional cost to truck in and cover the storm damages. That 11.2, that number is, and that's in italics because that's still pending. We believe that may be higher based on the state appropriation, but it's not under contract yet with the town of Fort Myers Beach. So there's some uncertainty there. So we are trying to be conservative in what we know. But that, again, as far as the beach project that would have applied to the 22.3, that's something that our bed tax revenues are already budgeted in anticipation of that project. So the additional need is one that DEP has provided some funding for. The town has a FEMA request pending, as well as that state renourishment contract, which is pending and could be up to $14 million, it looks like, coming from the state. Keeping going south, Lover's Key, that was supposed to be getting ready to go to construction right now. So we are a little bit delayed on that one, had major impacts there as it actually breached right here. That's where the pavilion used to be, the bathrooms, tram turnaround. So we've been working with the state park and our engineers to document what the damages were there. I mentioned that $5 million that the governor sent our way. That's what that 3.4 represents, is a portion of that. And that's still sort of a rough allocation. We don't know exactly how that $5 million is going to split between Lover's Key and Sanibel. The $12 million is what we already have budgeted to handle that. And the 0.4 is what's in that recovery plan governor's award that is coming our way. So we're in pretty good shape there. That 1.8 is in the counties. I think our legislative request on that actually is 2.2 million because of some dynamic nature of the pricing, but we're in pretty good shape on that one. Still anticipating we may get to construction on Lover's Key this year. And when we do, that will piggyback with Bonita Beach. They didn't lose as much volume down there because they didn't see as many of those big storm drainage cuts, if you will. Again, we have the nourishment already budgeted there, so we're looking at making up the difference on that one. Our legislative ask is 4.2, and those are, again, in process now, as well as potential FEMA claims there. So south of that is a beach that was very stable historically. but had some pretty significant impacts, about 55,000 cubic yards lost there and a cost of $4.5 million projected. It's not one that is likely to be eligible for FEMA. So again, in the recovery plan the state put forward, we're already anticipating $2.2 million going to the city of Bonita Springs, with a balance anticipated being included in the next session per the governor's early budget. So now we can get to the last slide, and Bill's gone. So that countywide need, and this is kind of our worst case scenario, that $55 million is based on an assumption that the FEMA funding doesn't come through, the Army Corps funding doesn't come through, and we're kind of left with this local need. I think that's highly unlikely. Many of these locations have great documented programs over time. We're going to get federal support that comes through. And then in addition, like I said, even if we didn't, then the bulk of that 55 would be covered under what we anticipate coming out of the next state legislative session based on the governor's proposed budget. So as far as the beaches go, I think we're really in pretty good shape. And in fact, in some cases, the level of funding that's coming in might actually reduce the demand for beach funding out of here in the near term, or at least defer it. Because Lake on Gasparilla is a great example. Army Corps comes in at 100%. Okay, well, that's now, $4 million that we don't have to spend up there. So I think that potentially, as far as the demand on our local resources with the TDC, it could actually work out to our advantage here, at least for a few years, with everybody recognizing the level of impacts and the need to help out. That may be a little bit of good news coming our way. So, you missed it, Bill.
I could.
Mayor Smith, yeah.
I think the question was, what do we have, with the TDC dollars that come in, we have that, 26% or so, I'm not sure what percentage goes to Beach for Nourishment. So I think the question was, what is in that pocket right now that
Right.
might be accessible for those that don't get the legislative ask?
That's a different question.
So since that Beach Renourishment Trust Fund is really designed on the known projects to be balance funded going forward in time, there wouldn't be extra in there. What I can't speak to is what is in the overall reserves, because again, we don't differentiate in the reserves. That's a common pool of funds that are available. It's not segmented just out for beaches. I don't know what's in there right now, but again, I'd anticipate that the need is much, much less than this, and we just have to give it a little bit of time to play out.
I thought the reserves was more than this.
Consider
The common reserve, the bigger reserve number, which includes operating the Bureau, the stadium debt service, everything together, over 50 million.
Right.
We think closer to 60 million. And again, that's a number you have to grab because it's based on how much you spent the year before and, all those other things. But it's a little bit of a moving target in that how do things pan out, but over 50 million. But what you didn't hear Steve say was he thinks the resources are being allocated where we may not need those funds for beach nourishment.
Yeah, I'm just planning for the worst case scenario.
Correct.
other avenues that we can look for our tourism industry to rebound.
Correct.
Comes from the TDC dollars.
Correct.
Okay. Yep.
Any other, Mr. Kramer, yeah? And then Mr. Wells.
Fantastic news. Thank you for the good news. Money being there and us having a plan and being able to get things back. I guess for me, the million-dollar question is, that's a lot of sand, it's a lot of trucks, it's a lot of arms and people moving. How long do we think this is going to take to re-nourish our beaches in a real-world scenario?
So I think it's unrealistic to think that everything we just walked through would be done before the end of 2024. The first thing that's going to happen will be that truck haul to Sanibel and Lovers Key, and that is getting ready to go out to bid right now. And as soon as the engineers help us fine-tune the documents, that'll be going out. And so that will be this summer, most likely, that we'll be able to get some of that protection back out there. Then the next thing that we know of that's coming will be Lovers Key and Bonita Beach. And we anticipate being out to bid on those late summer. And the South Bonita piece that is not within our project area, we're talking about ways that we might be able to kind of leverage that activity to fold that in, having some early conversations with Fort Myers Beach about that possibility as well. So those go pretty quickly. We have to be careful about over-allocating our resources to do this just from a staffing perspective, but Blind Pass will be ready to go as soon as we can be ready to go. So the big unknowns are like Sanibel has a huge project there potentially in an area that they've never had to work before, lots of unknowns. So I don't even know if anybody's guessing what that timing might look like there. CEPD, because they had just finished their major nourishment, they have the ability to kind of relax a little bit and see how it all plays out and, you know, take advantage of when resources are available to try to get the best pricing if they can. They've got that opportunity to do that. And they got some, as did Fort Myers Beach and Bonita Beach, some of the sand that overwashed onto the roads that was sifted by the local governments and put back on has helped to rebuild some of the dunes in some of those locations and put a little bit of a Band-Aid on. So, but it looks like realistically we're going to be doing this over the next 24 months.
Could I make sure that I state that? Well, let's just talk about that. So it would be unfair, though, if you heard the conversation that we just had and said, Lee County's not going to have beaches for another 2 years. Because incrementally, they're going to come back over the next 2 years. And by the end of that 2-year cycle, we believe we could be done with all of them. But incrementally, there are some that could come back towards the end of this year, some that will come back early on in 24, maybe in 24. But to finish all of it, it would be unfair to say that we would finish all of it by 2024. But that doesn't mean that we won't have usable beaches in the meantime. We'll start to have some come online over the next 6 to 12 months, right? That's fair to say? Okay. Yeah. Mayor Smith?
Yes, it's very fair to say.
Yeah.
We opened 2 of ours this past Saturday, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
And we are looking to continually open those up as we can.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's going to be work to do. There's going to be go-arounds for those scouring areas, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to be accessible, but the work is going to be done. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be impossibly optimistic.
Yeah, me too.
As we work forward, and we got 2 open this week, and we're real excited about that.
Well, you know, one thing I think it's important for all of us to do, whether we're a city or whether we're a county, and it's something that I've even talked to our county administration about too, is celebrate the milestones as they happen. You know what I mean? We need to celebrate as we get even just a smaller portion of beach open, those 2 that you've got open. Celebrate those. Make sure that everybody knows about those because it provides hope and optimism and even a signal to the rest of the world, right, that we are coming back, that this isn't, because you saw in Mr. St. Germain's presentation, right? A lot of people don't know when we could come back. There's that big question there. Well, the more we can start to promote those milestones, the more we start to bring certainty to that scenario there. At least that's my thought.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Tamara and then Mr. Wells, yes.
I just want to say, you know, we renourish beaches regularly and those beaches are open. So don't assume that because we're renourishing beaches, we can't enjoy the beach. So I think that just an important statement, I think, in terms of this.
We'll close 1,000 feet at a time. Everything else is open.
Mr. Wells?
Mine's more of a technical question, but I noticed that some of these overheads, some of these shorelines have a seawall between the I guess, upland and where the beach starts. And I guess in certain times that seawall's kind of hidden by the fact that the sand goes right up to the seawall. Did you find that effective during this event at keeping beaches safer than if those seawalls did not exist?
That's a really complicated question and probably can only be answered on a site-specific basis. Seawalls certainly can help protect what's landward of them. They can also have some negative impacts on the beach frontage. And part of that depends on the design, the location, what the beach health was. So it's probably not fair to give a blanket statement.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Wachulis?
Steve, going back to the blue projects, those are all happening this year on Sanibel, Fort Myers Beach, timing wise?
So the blue project on Sanibel was associated with Blind Pass, and that's permitted, funded, pretty much ready to go as soon as we're confident that things have settled out. We know what's going to happen where and have the resources to get that to construction. Fort Myers Beach is still in the permitting phases. That's being done by the town. So they're still working on some permits there. They need some easements from property owners in order to get that implemented. But I believe that they're hoping to be ready for that bidding in this calendar year as well.
And, you know, maybe the last question to kind of like pull it all together, the question that I asked when I got a chance to present to the Beach and Shoreline Conference last week, Steve, that you were at as well, was will we ever be able to walk confidently barefoot on the beach again? And the answer was absolutely from the engineers that I spoke with there. And can you kind of just in layman's terms explain basically what they said was, we're going to put several feet of sand on top of everything, almost 200 feet out into the water in some places too. So if that several feet of sand covers up anything that might be there, then you can walk confidently on the beach again barefoot. And that's what I think we're all looking forward to, because that's a huge part of the tourism experience.
Yeah, and I think there are areas where you had those kind of deep cuts and it tended to accumulate debris. Well, we don't just bury that. Any place where that exists, we always clean the debris that we can before we put sand on top of it. And then you're right, the sand that's coming in is coming from pristine sources, and it'll be great.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, Mr. Wachulis.
Sorry, my last question. The buildings that are like Lynn Hall and Bowditch, those are, I mean, I know that's not part of your project, but are those in the works of getting?
Yeah, that's a real source of frustration right now for us here at the county. The way, when I've asked our county administration about this, the way it's been explained to me is that we're currently waiting on FEMA inspections to take place, that we must inventory and then suggest what our repairs are that we need to make to that. And then we need a FEMA inspector to come and look at it and sign off and say, yep, that's something we'll reimburse you all for. And until they do that, they make that inspection, they want us to leave it as is, which is frustrating because I think people want to get in there and use whatever part is usable. So is that a correct characterization, Ms. Brady?
Yeah, actually, Chairman, thank you for bringing that up. You know, at your board meeting yesterday, you directed staff to prepare a letter to send to our legislative bodies, both at a state and federal level, to request additional inspectors. But as part of the reimbursement process, in order for these projects to get the federal disaster dollars that are needed to repair these things, we have to go through that step. We are looking at potential expedited process on some of the smaller projects. There's a little bit more research that we need to do to see whether or not that's an option, but any way that we can move these projects forward as quickly as we can, that is our goal.
So worst case scenario, if we don't get the FEMA dollars for that, that'll come as capital projects out of the reserves and out of that 60 million. Right? Am I saying that right?
That's one source of funds we could look at. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we you know, in the county, we have multiple sources of funds and multiple reserves. And I think that's certainly one we could look at. Just to kind of give you a bigger picture look at what the county's facing, we did actually look at the total amount of open purchase orders in relation to the storm is close to $273 million right now. So we owe it to the residents of Lee County to seek every ounce of reimbursement we can seek so that we don't put that bill on the local residents here. So. Yeah, Mayor Smith.
And when we look at those numbers again, although you have countywide beach projects, Sanibel's, we have our specific ask, which is that beach project. So know that each municipality is making their own ask and looking for different funding sources before we might come back to the county and make that request. So we look at every avenue. So that 30 million, you can kind of take a little bit out of the county because that's our request. And we have other requests as well for a lot of the beach projects.
But, and like you mentioned before too, it is important to the whole county that we also support our municipal requests because your beaches are our beaches, you're part of our county, and we want to make sure that you're just as successful as anybody is. So yeah, we have had really good meetings with people in Tallahassee at the legislative level to let them know that this is the year that we're usually not up here asking for stuff, but this is the year we're going to be up here asking for help because our community needs it right now. But on top of that, I've told them it's an investment back into the future of Florida's economy because we were, if you look at our numbers up to September 28th, we're killing it. We really were for the economy. And so we'll be back to being a really positive contributor to Florida's economy as soon as we get repaired.
And all of us are kind of talking the same language in Tallahassee. And I think for any of you that haven't been up or going up, you need to. I've been up as well. Saying the same thing. This is about Southwest Florida's recovery. Each of our pieces fit together, but each of our municipalities have those asks, and we work with the county and let them know what our asks are as well, as I'm sure you do as well for the other municipalities.
I think we're just about at the 10 minutes we allotted for this one.
Really?
So
I'm sorry I didn't put my contact information in there, but look at your agenda. It's first initial, last name, so sboutel@legov.com. If you've got any other questions, just shoot me an email. Happy to answer what I can.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate your presentation. All right, let's move to new business in the first quarter budget report.
So I'm just going to kind of take over here so that we go a little more quickly because we've had a lot of great discussion today. If you'll remember, in December, we gave you a fourth quarter budget report and said we would come back to you and give you final budget report. There's no substantial changes from the report we gave you at fourth quarter and the final budget report, but they're in your packet. I'm going to just have them put up on the screen the first quarter budget reports, however. As you will see in the main VCB operating budget, we've expended about 11% of our total in Q1. That's on purpose. We are definitely trying to moderate some of our expenditures to revenue. I don't know that it will be completely possible, but we're going to do our best to do that. You flip to the next one, please. Beach and shoreline, a little bit harder to do it on that one because most of that budget is personnel, but it's at 21% and a much smaller budget, obviously. And then the sports development Q1 budget is at 14%. Everything's on track. And if you have any questions, happy to try to answer those, or April is here as well, but I thought we'd do this as quickly as possible. Sir.
Yeah, Mr. Stein.
Just a quick question, and it goes back to the county as a whole. And the advertising line item at 8%, I can understand wanting to save some funds, but one of the sensitivities I have seeing that is those businesses that are open and that are surviving and will be the calling card for the people that we are trying to bring here. I would think that while we were trying to save in some areas, that the advertising budget would concern me a little bit with it only using 8%.
In fairness, in Q1, we went dark because we needed to for a period of time. We started our marketing again in December. And of course, those bills will come in January, February, as you would expect, they follow, they're not in advance. So we're back marketing again. Recovery marketing is underway. Brian presented a pretty thorough report last month of our efforts. And if you have not had a chance to do so, I encourage you to look at leavevcb.com and the My Fort Myers Recovery Campaign. Examples of what we're doing and placements, a whole bunch of information is there related to that. But advertising is back on, I promise. We exist to market this destination. That's what this organization does. Yes, ma'am.
The sports development piece, have you
guys seen, in lieu of all the conversation with the hurricane, any decrease that is overly proportionate to the lack of hotel availability, or is it, given the availability, people are still coming for spring training? Or is it too early to tell?
It might be a little bit too early to tell. I can, perhaps Mr. Weber wants to speak to ticket sales. I don't want to put him on the spot since he's here.
While he thinks about an answer, maybe to phrase the question this way, I know obviously there's a great relationship between Director Milkey and our department here. Has he mentioned that we've seen any tournaments cancel? Has he mentioned a major drop in room nights related to any of the planned tournaments?
I won't put words in Jeff's mouth. Obviously, some things did not happen as a direct result of the hurricane. However, every event that we can possibly host, we are hosting. And yes, finding rooms has been a challenge. I'm sure some of those people attending sporting events in Lee County have been staying in Collier County and Charlotte County to attend those events, but we have been doing our best to keep as many of them in the county as we can. Executing the sporting events is critical to our success. And the one thing Jeff will tell you is that all the partners that bring sporting events to our area can't wait to come back here. They know we need this business. They know how important it is. They want to support us. You'll remember we did execute the Fort Myers tip-off, and I'm sorry, I'm going to forget the name of the other event. Brian will help me. Showcase, Gulf Coast Showcase, sorry, apologies, it went out of my head, but Gulf Coast Showcase both happened in November, 2 basketball events that are really important, and of course, from day one, we said we're committed to spring training. Jesse and I were in Minneapolis last week, 2 weekends ago, very cold, by the way. Joseph, I don't know how you live there, but I know why you now live in Florida. This lifelong Floridian was not happy with that weather, but the negative degrees do not work for me. We had great conversations with Twins fans. Many of them said they had their tickets, they're ready to come. They had lots of questions about the area. They certainly understand that they won't be staying primarily along the coastline for this spring training, but they have made alternate plans. I can tell you, some of them absolutely said that they are staying in Clearwater and Sarasota and attending games there, but also coming down and attending games with us. Let's be very fair. We know that some of our winter visitors are going to be going to the north and to the south of us. That's good news because we want them to stay in the region. Their passion for this part of Florida is important. We are in a challenging time. It's going to be difficult for us to meet all of those obligations given the resources we have.
Good question. Yeah, Mr. Wells?
And also, just real quick, speaking of the advertising budget, I was attended a Visit Florida meeting last week, and it was nice to see that they put a marketing campaign together on behalf of the areas that were hit by hurricane. And there were several areas, and ours was one of the biggest ones, obviously, in front center of the storm that got considerable funding from that as well. So I think that our partners statewide are also
And we had a big campaign planned for Visit Florida, big TV campaign, over the top TV campaign, and we asked them to delay it a little bit because timing wasn't exactly right when we were ready to go to marketplace, but they're doing that for us, and that's a huge matching fund situation. So that's a very close relationship and one we value very much. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is to accept the first quarter budget report from Mr. Wells, and the second was from Mr. Wachulis. Okay, very good. Any further discussion on that item? Are there any objections to the motion? All right, seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. All right, next is to appoint the TDC Attractions and Events Marketing Subcommittee.
Good morning, Nancy McPhee, Product Development. We talked a lot about beaches, and I wanted just to remind the TDC that the beach and shoreline application cycle for next fiscal year funding is currently open. And while all of you will be invited to review those requests and participate in a workshop on April 6th, the TDC customarily appoints a subcommittee to review event and attraction marketing request. For this year, it was Councilman Cronin, Johnson, and Smith, and they allocated to 8 events, 2 of which had to cancel because of the storm, and they allocated to 32 attractions. And I'm happy to say that only 5 of those attractions are not open, but they are continuing to reach out to their followers digitally and socially and inspiring those followers to continue to keep an eye on our destination. So this morning, I'm asking for you to appoint a subcommittee of a minimum of 3 members that can participate in the online review of these requests for next fiscal year. They need to be available between May and July to do the online review, and 2 public workshops. You do not have to be a voting member of the TDC to participate on the committee. So is there any questions or nominations?
I'll nominate Pam Cronin. That's what you get for not being here, right?
How many do we need on the slate then?
A minimum of 5, 3, I'm sorry, and a maximum of 5.
All right, so Mayor Smith.
I think you can help them. I'd be happy to help on that. I've enjoyed it over the years and happy to continue.
Okay, so Mayor Smith, Pam Cronin, who else? We have Jay Johnson?
I'll do it to keep an eye on Holly.
Okay, all right. Jay Johnson, who else? We need 2 more.
Let's nominate, let's check with Dan Allers. He's new, and we can check with him.
Minimum of 3, maximum of 5.
Okay. Dan Allers, okay.
And let him see if he'd like to be able to do that. I know that he's got a lot going on.
And then how about one more to make it an odd number then? We're at 4 right now.
I'll participate.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. All right, so there's our slate. It would be Cronin, Council Member Cronin. It would be Mayor Smith, TDC Council Member Johnson, Mayor Allers, and Councilwoman Bonk. Do we have a motion on the floor for that slate to move it forward?
So moved.
Okay, the motion's from Councilman Steinke, and the second is from Council Member Wells. Any further discussion on that? Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right. Thank you very much.
If I may, Chair, I wanted to mention, because you're doing for Council's information, the VCB has collaborated with the City of Cape Coral's Communication Office to launch the Cape Coral Quest. This is the 3rd mobile passport that the VCB has put out, and Cape Coral did most of the work. It's a scavenger hunt that's gamified, so you win points. The ultimate prize, people will be entered into a chance to win a stay at the West End. So we wanted to make sure that you knew that was live as of this week, and there's flyers on the table if you want to take some with you. Thank you.
That's a fantastic idea. I just want to say, as a Cape Coral native, born and raised there, there's so much that I think people don't know about that we have in Cape Coral, that this is the year, I believe, with not being able to take that traditional beach vacation, that you can go and explore areas like Cape Coral, like downtown Fort Myers, and come and see all the other things like shopping, dining, and amazing amenities and things like that we have to offer here besides the beaches. And so I think that's really going to carry the water this year. And Councilman, you had a comment?
I just had one question as it related to the attraction funding. Could any of the members that were responsible for the approvals here, there were 4 projects that didn't receive full funding. Could they just make mention to one of the reasons why the others would receive full funding, and then there was the reductions in the others?
Was it events or attractions?
It was attractions.
So there could have been pieces of their request that they submitted that were ineligible. There could have been, sometimes new attractions aren't fully funded until the committee learns more about how they operate and the impact on tourism. So I'd have to look back in my notes to see exactly what other reasons there might have been, but.
Sometimes they didn't fill out the whole thing. Question.
Thanks. All right. Thank you very much. So at this time, we'll move to 4 council information. Anything, Ms. Pygott, that you'd like to mention?
There are a couple items in your packet, but probably the most interesting one is AHLA's Future of Hotels report. So you might want to take a look at that, the trends for 2023. So something the hoteliers might be specifically interested in. Good report.
Where is that? I'm sorry.
In your packet, one of the last items at the very, very end, and you'll get this in a PDF to your, a Dropbox to the PDF after the meeting, but might be an interesting report for you to take a look at.
Very good. One more thing for council information, if I could make the request. Yesterday, or Tuesday, the Lee County Board of County Commissioners amended the state legislative agenda that we proposed to our lawmakers in Tallahassee. We added many of the requests that Mr. Boutel covered today into our legislative agenda. So this year, as we go to Tallahassee, I believe that absolutely all eyes from the governor's office to the House of Representatives to the Senate are on our area to try and provide help to recover from the storm. We've had nothing but positive response when we've gone up there from the lawmakers. There is one thing to be aware of, though. Not that we're in competition, but just to understand that we were not the only area hit by a storm last year. Actually, Hurricane Nicole did tremendous amounts of damage. In fact, potentially more expensive beach and shoreline damage to the east coast of the state of Florida. And so as they look and deliberate over funding this year, just know that there is also the consideration of helping the east coast counties who needed help recovering from Hurricane Nicole. It would be important, I think, for all of us to, and this is my request, that we get the legislative agenda to the council here, so that as you all think about maybe sending an email to the legislative delegation that we outline in there, just saying we support these requests, they're really important for our economy, it would really help out our job creators. I think that any support that we can give our delegation as they go to Tallahassee to try and secure that funding for us would be certainly very helpful. And so that's kind of my for council information request.
We will get a copy of that legislative agenda to all the TDC.
Excellent. All right. All right. At this time, we'll move to TDC member items. Let's start with Mr. Wachulis. You got anything?
23, as we know, it's going to be a challenge, but we just are doing our insurance renewal. Get prepared. Our renewal is February 15th, and our insurance costs are going up 400%. So my advice is start preparing if you're an association or a business to see the increase. And if you're a homeowner, do not change your insurance right now, because you're going to be just stuck with Citizens. So it's the next 12 months is going to, the insurance market's upside down, but you're going to get capital that's going to flood, and then we'll see it better in 24. But right now, it's just a mess. So my advice is start preparing.
Excellent. Mayor Smith?
Progress every day. We were excited to open some beaches on Saturday, excited that our post office, mobile post office got on to our 33957 on Monday, and our school started yesterday, which is a big deal. Our community's coming back together as much as they can. I think we've got more of a unified community than we had before. Tragedy brings great opportunity. Looking forward to what we've got to look forward to. Also appreciate everything that the county's doing as we all work together for, as you indicated, all of Southwest Florida. I've been to Tallahassee once. I'll be continuing to go up. Any messages that we can all send unified is so important, but I think it is important to understand we will not be the only ones hit here. The storm hit a lot, Nicole hit a lot, and we'll move forward as Leon said so well. We will all move forward together. So insurance, I know for our residents as well, really watching because many are being dropped. There's a lot of controversy on at what level Citizens may or may not continue to keep coverage, which could impact us all. So we all just need to really stay focused. Any information, let's try to share what we can with each other so we can all have the best decision and facts we can.
Excellent. Councilwoman Bonk? All right. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you.
All right. How about Mr. Fullick? Welcome to the TDC. We're so pleased to have you join us. And anything from the good city of Bonita?
Thank you, Commissioner. My apologies to all my inauspicious start of being late to the first meeting. One thing on the insurance that fortunately our lobbyists shared with us, that there are currently 5 major companies, insurance companies, that are not currently doing business in the state of Florida that have already submitted their paperwork. It will take probably the entire year to make it happen, but the capital's coming back, and this is going to be a tougher year probably than 2024. Secondly, I've heard nothing from our staff at the city about how the working relationship with the county has been so helpful, so thank you for that.
Oh, great. We're happy to work with y'all and excited to all come back from this. Better days are ahead. Councilman, thank you.
Thank you. I can only echo your remarks as it relates to Cape Coral, and no better time to visit it if you've not. The restaurants are there, the attractions, the water life is there, the critters are there, the owls. So lots of things for people to see, and a not very well publicized fact is that Cape Coral has approximately 9,000 private rental availabilities there. So it's not just a matter of is there a hotel to accommodate, but there are private residences that we have always been a relative mecca for privately owned rentals. And so there's a place for them to stay.
Councilman Faisal?
I don't have much to say other than the insurance that's been discussed. My association has been already told it's going to go up well over 100%, and I didn't think I could hear anything that made me feel good about that number until Bill says his is going up 400%. So, relatively speaking, I guess I shouldn't feel so bad.
Thank you. Mr. Kramer?
Just some I guess, good news for those that are still rebuilding and going into the future. We just finished our January at the resort, and we thought we were going to lose about 6,000 group nights that were going to not come because of everything that happened. We ended up picking up over 7,000 group nights in the month of January that did come, experience the area, experience Southwest Florida, had amazing times. The emails that I've gotten back were that what an amazing job the area has done in cleaning up. A lot of people got from the airport to, I know it's Vita Springs, it's not Fort Myers Beach, but didn't see that there were too many effects from a hurricane, and they were excited to be here. And we started the year off a couple of million ahead of where we thought we were going to be.
Oh, wow.
So it's encouraging for those that are rebuilding that people do still want to come, and they'll come, and they'll be back, and they'll be stronger than ever.
Thank you for that good news. Yeah. Mr. Wells? All right, Mr. Lappy.
Good news, February 22, the Sentinel Captiva Chamber will be hosting the luncheon at Twin Lakes. So we look forward to those that can make it. Parking will probably be an issue, but it'll be covered.
Rob, you pick me up?
Thank you, Mr. Lappy. Very good. Is there any further business before us, Ms. Pygott? All right, seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
There you go.